I was sitting at a candlelit table, table 12, beside my 6-year-old grandson Noah at my son Daniel's second wedding. The air thick with the scent of roses and champagne, their sweetness mingling with the faint tang of polished silver. The chandeliers overhead cast a warm golden shimmer across the room, catching on the pristine white tablecloths and making the crystal glasses sparkle like stars. Noah's small fingers fidgeted with his blue toy truck, its wheels scraping softly against the fabric, leaving tiny fleeting marks. His dark curls fell over his forehead, and his hazel eyes darted nervously, as if he could sense a shadow I hadn't yet seen. Today was Daniel's wedding to Elise, his second wife, and though the room buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, a quiet unease stirred in my chest. Like a whisper I couldn't quite hear, I smoothed Noah's little suit jacket, my fingers lingering on the soft velvet collar, and my heart tightened with the memory of his mother, Sarah. Her laughter once filled our family like sunlight through a kitchen window, warm and golden, chasing away the chill of any hard day. She'd been gone 3 years, stolen by a sudden illness that left us all adrift like a boat unmoored in a storm. Noah was only 3 then, too young to grasp the permanence of her absence, but old enough to feel the hollow it carved in his small world. I'd become his anchor, his safe harbor, braiding my life around his to keep Sarah's memory alive. Every time I tied his shoelaces or tucked him into bed, it felt like a vow to her, a promise to protect the piece of her she'd left behind. The jazz band played a gentle tune, a soft saxophone weaving through the hum of chatter and the clatter of silverware. White lilies adorned every table, their petals glowing like tiny moons under the candlelight, their fragrance heavy and almost cloying. Daniel moved through the crowd, his navy suit crisp, his smile bright but fragile, like glass polished to hide its cracks. He shook hands, raised toasts, and laughed with guests, but I knew that smile. It was the one he wore to mask the grief that still lingered, the weight of losing Sarah that pressed against his chest even now. Elise, radiant in a lace gown that shimmered like moonlight on water, stood near the dance floor, laughing with her friends, her cousin Lila among them. Her confidence was magnetic, her gestures precise, but earlier that evening, I'd caught her dismissing Noah's attempt to show her his toy truck with a curt wave. Her smile tight and fleeting, a flicker of something cold that made my stomach twist, like a draft in a warm room. I told myself it was just nerves, the weight of a new chapter for our family, but the unease clung to me like damp air. Waiters glided between tables, their black vests blending into the shadows, offering trays of appetizers, tiny quiches with golden crusts, stuffed mushrooms glistening with butter, and shrimp cocktails nestled in delicate glass cups. The older couple at our table, friends of Daniel's from his accounting firm, leaned over, their faces softened by the candlelight. "Noah's getting so big, Clara," the woman Margaret said warmly, her silver earrings catching the light. "How old is he now?" I smiled, cutting a piece of soft, crusty bread for Noah, the knife scraping faintly against the plate. "Just turned 6 last month," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. It's hard to believe how fast time slips by. Margaret nodded, her eyes kind, but I noticed Noah barely touched his food, his gaze fixed on his toy truck, his small shoulders hunched as if shielding himself from the world. Suddenly, Noah froze, his hand gripping mine under the table, his fingers cold and trembling. His voice was barely a whisper, so soft I had to lean close to hear him over the murmur of the crowd. "Grandma, we need to leave now." My pulse quickened, a sharp jolt that made my breath catch. I brushed his curls back, searching his wide, fearful eyes. "What's wrong, my love?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle to soothe him, though my own heart began to race. He swallowed hard, his lips quivering. "You didn't see the napkin, did you?" His words hit like a stone dropping into still water, sending ripples of dread through me. I forced a calm smile, though my hands shook beneath the table. "It's okay, sweetheart. Let Grandma check." I lifted the edge of the tablecloth, the fabric cool and heavy in my fingers, and peered into the dim space below. There it was, a napkin, folded tightly into a small square, lying on the floor near Noah's chair like a secret waiting to be found. My breath caught, and the world seemed to tilt. The room spun around me, the laughter and music fading into a dull, distant roar, like waves heard from underwater. Noah pressed closer, his small body trembling against my side, his breath quick and uneven. I reached for the napkin, my fingers brushing the crisp linen, its edges sharp as if warning me to stop. The guests around us chatted on, their voices a cheerful hum, oblivious to the storm brewing in my chest. I unfolded the napkin under the table, my hands unsteady, and in the dim glow of the candles, I read the scrawled words, Table 12. Add peanut butter to the child's dessert. Mix into chocolate mousse, $50 tip. The date, October 31st, 2025, was written in the corner, the black ink stark against the white linen. My blood ran cold, my chest tightening as if the air had been sucked from the room. Noah was severely allergic to peanuts. A single bite could send him into anaphylactic shock, his throat closing, his small body fighting for breath. Who would do this? On my son's wedding day? The words burned into my mind, each one a jagged edge cutting deeper. I stood abruptly, pulling Noah close, his small frame tucked against me as if I could shield him from the world. The older couple at our table paused, their forks hovering, their eyes flickering with concern. "Clara, is everything all right?" Margaret asked, her voice soft but edged with worry. I managed a tight smile, my voice low. "Just need a moment," I said, though my heart pounded so loudly I was sure they could hear it. Memories flooded back, unbidden and sharp. Sarah's warm hugs, her voice singing lullabies to Noah in their small Ohio home, the way she'd cut his apples into perfect little stars, her fingers deft and loving. Those moments were gone, stolen by her illness, and now someone threatened the one piece of her I had left. I clutched Noah tighter, his hand cold and trembling in mine, his toy truck still gripped in his other hand, its wheels silent now. My mind raced, the weight of the napkin's words pressing against my chest. Could I trust the room, these smiling faces? I needed answers, and I needed them now. I scanned the room, my eyes cutting through the crowd. Elise was still by the dance floor, her laughter sharp and bright, her gown catching the light like a beacon. Something in her posture, too poised, too perfect, set my nerves on edge, like a violin string pulled too tight. I turned to my niece, Hannah, who sat beside Noah, her beige dress soft against the white tablecloth, her face etched with concern as she watched us. "Watch him for me," I whispered, my voice trembling despite my effort to keep it steady. She nodded, pulling Noah into her lap, her arms wrapping around him like a protective shield. "I've got him, Aunt Clara," she said, her voice firm, though her eyes mirrored my fear. I moved toward the bar, my legs heavy as if wading through water, driven by a fire I couldn't name. The polished wood of the bar gleamed under the chandeliers, and the waiters were gathered there, laughing over a tray of empty glasses, their voices light and carefree. I recognized one, a young man named Ryan, who'd served our table earlier, his smile easy and boyish. That smile vanished when I held up the napkin, its folded edges stark in my hand. "Who gave you this?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended, cutting through their chatter. Ryan's eyes widened, his hands fumbling as he set down a glass. "Ma'am, I dropped it by mistake," he stammered, his face paling. "A woman handed it to me, said it was for the chef." My chest tightened, a vice squeezing my ribs. "Who?" I pressed, stepping closer, the napkin trembling in my grip. He shook his head, his voice small. "I don't know her name. She was in a green dress near the cake table." I swear, I didn't know what it said. Fury surged through me, hot and wild, but I forced it down, swallowing it like bitter medicine. Noah needed me to stay sharp, to think clearly. I glanced back at the table where Hannah was whispering to Noah, her hand stroking his hair, keeping him calm. His small face was pressed against her shoulder. His toy truck clutched tightly, and a flicker of relief warmed me. I'd caught this before it reached him. But the question burned, searing my thoughts. Who would target a child? Why? I tucked the napkin into my pocket, its edges sharp against my fingers, and returned to the ballroom, my steps heavy but resolute. The music swelled, a bright, lilting melody that felt like a mockery of the dread pooling in my stomach. The scent of roasted lamb and rosemary filled the air as waiters began serving the main course, their trays steaming with plates of herb-crusted meat and creamy mashed potatoes. Elise was now at the head table, her smile unwavering as she raised a glass, her lace gown glowing like a halo. Daniel stood beside her, his eyes bright with hope, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. But for me, the room felt like a stage, every smile a mask, every gesture a performance. I couldn't let this pass. My heart pounded, but I steadied myself, knowing Noah's safety depended on my resolve. I stood again, Noah's hand in mine, his small fingers anchoring me to my purpose. I raised my voice above the din, my words cutting through the music like a blade. "Everyone, please, I need your attention." The room stilled, the clinking of glasses and chatter falling away, leaving only the faint hum of the jazz band fading into silence. Eyes turned to me, curious, confused, some tinged with annoyance. I held up the napkin, its white linen stark against the golden light, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. "Who wrote this note to add peanuts to my grandson's dessert?" My words hung in the air, heavy and accusing, and a ripple of gasps moved through the crowd like a wave. Daniel hurried over, his face pale, his tie slightly askew. "Mom, what's happening?" he asked, his voice low, urgent. I handed him the napkin, my fingers brushing his, my voice barely above a whisper. "Read it!" His hands shook as he scanned the words, his jaw tightening, his eyes darkening with a mix of disbelief and fear. Elise approached, her brow furrowed with feigned confusion, her gown rustling softly as she moved. "Clara, what's this about?" she asked, her voice smooth as silk, her lips curving into a practiced smile. I met her gaze, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might burst. "Noah's allergic to peanuts," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "This note could have killed him." The room fell into a deathly silence, the weight of my words sinking in, heavy as stone. Elise laughed, a brittle, high-pitched sound that echoed in the quiet. "This is absurd," she said, her hands fluttering to her chest, her diamond ring glinting. "You think I'd do this? It's just a piece of paper." Her words stung, sharp and dismissive, but I saw her hands tremble, her fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve. Hannah stood, her beige dress catching the light, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Enough, Elise," she said, her tone ice cold, her eyes blazing. Before anyone could react, she stepped forward and slapped Elise across the face, the sound sharp and final, echoing through the ballroom like a gunshot. Guests froze, their whispers rising like a tide, a chorus of shock and disbelief. Elise clutched her cheek, tears welling in her eyes, her composure crumbling. "Daniel, she's lying," she cried, turning to him, her voice breaking. "She's jealous." "She's always been jealous." But Hannah didn't waver, her fists clenched at her sides, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You wanted to hurt Noah," she said, her words a quiet accusation heavy with truth. "On your wedding day." Daniel's face crumpled, his gaze darting between the napkin in his hand and Elise's tear-streaked face. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice breaking, raw with pain. Elise stammered, her hands fluttering, her composure cracking like thin ice. "It's a mistake," she said, her voice weak. "Someone's framing me." But her eyes betrayed her, flickering with guilt, darting to the floor as if seeking an escape. I couldn't hold back anymore. The anger inside me burned too hot, too fierce. I slammed the napkin on the table, the glasses rattling, their clinking a sharp counterpoint to my voice. "Ryan, come here," I called, my tone unwavering despite the tremor in my hands. The young waiter approached from the corner, his face ashen, his steps hesitant. "Is this the note?" I asked, holding it up, its black ink stark in the candlelight. He nodded, his voice shaking. "Yes, ma'am. The woman in the green dress gave it to me. I dropped it by mistake." Before Elise could speak, a soft, trembling voice broke through the tension. Her cousin Lila, barely 20, tears streaming down her face as she stood from her chair. "It was Elise," she sobbed, her hands twisting together. "She told me to pass the note to the waiter. I didn't know what it meant. I swear." The room erupted in murmurs, a wave of shock rippling through the guests. Elise shouted, her voice sharp and desperate. "Lila, stop lying!" she cried, her face disfigured with anger, her hands clenched into fists. But Lila shook her head, trembling from head to toe, her voice breaking. "I'm not lying," she said between sobs. "You gave me the note. You told me it was for the chef." Her words were a dagger, piercing through Elise's carefully constructed facade, leaving the ballroom in a state of stunned silence. An older relative, Mr. Thompson, shook his head, his voice thick with disgust. "To harm a child at a wedding," he muttered, his words echoing the growing outrage. Hannah stepped forward again, her voice cold and unyielding. "We can check the cameras," she said, her eyes locked on Elise. "It'll show everything." Elise's face drained of color, her lips tightening into a thin line, her silence louder than any confession. Daniel sank into a chair, his hands covering his face, the napkin crumpled in his fist. "Noah's my son," he whispered, his voice raw, breaking under the weight of betrayal. "You tried to hurt my son." I placed the napkin on the table, its edges worn from my grip, and declared in a voice that carried through the room, "No one who threatens my grandson belongs in this family." My words were a sentence, final and unyielding, cutting through the murmurs like a blade. Security approached, their faces stern, their steps measured. "Ma'am, please come with us," one said to Elise, his voice cold but polite. She backed away, her eyes darting wildly, seeking an ally, but no one moved to help her. Guests whispered, their voices a chorus of disbelief and contempt. "Unbelievable," one murmured. "How could someone be so cruel?" another said, shaking her head. Daniel knelt before Noah, tears streaming down his face, his hands trembling as he cupped his son's cheeks. "I'm so sorry, buddy," he said, his voice choked with grief. "I failed you." Noah's small arms wrapped around his father's neck, his toy truck falling to the floor with a soft clatter. I lifted Daniel up, my hands firm on his shoulders, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "We stopped it in time," I said. "That's what matters." I glanced at Elise, her silhouette retreating under the escort of security, her lace gown trailing behind her like a fading dream. In my heart, I knew she never was and never would be part of this family. In the weeks that followed, our family walked through a haze of pain and healing, the wedding a wound that lingered in our small Ohio town. The story spread like wildfire, whispered in coffee shops and church pews, a tale of betrayal that left scars on us all. Daniel withdrew, his laughter gone, replaced by a quiet guilt that shadowed his steps. He'd take Noah to school each morning, his eyes distant, his voice soft and subdued. Elise's name became a ghost we refused to acknowledge, her presence erased from our lives like dust swept from a floor. I poured myself into Noah, making his favorite blueberry pancakes, their sweet aroma filling the kitchen, reading him stories of brave knights and dragons under the soft glow of his bedside lamp, trying to rebuild the safety she'd threatened. But it was Hannah who brought Noah back to life, her presence a steady light in our darkened days. She'd pack his lunch with care, tucking in notes with little doodles, a sun, a star, a heart drawn in bright crayon. "Look, Grandma, Aunt Hannah drew a rocket." Noah would giggle, his hazel eyes bright again, his laughter like a melody I'd feared was lost. She'd take him to the park, teaching him to skip stones across the pond, her hands steadying him when he stumbled, her laughter mingling with his as they chased each other through the grass. One night, when Noah spiked a fever, his small body burning under the blankets, Hannah stayed by his side, humming softly, her hand cool against his forehead as she placed damp cloths to ease the heat. I watched from the doorway, my heart swelling with gratitude, and noticed Daniel's gaze linger on her, grateful, tender, and carrying a quiet depth I hadn't seen in years. One evening, as we sat around the table, the warm scent of my homemade lasagna filling the air, Noah's voice broke the silence. "I want Aunt Hannah to be my mommy," he said, his words clear and certain, his small hands clutching his fork. The room stilled, the clink of silverware pausing. Hannah blushed, her fork pausing mid-air, her cheeks flushing as she lowered her eyes. Daniel's eyes glistened, a spark of hope breaking through the pain that had clouded them for so long. I rested my hand on his arm, my voice soft but sure. "Love isn't in grand gestures, Daniel," I said. "It's in the quiet moments that hold us together." Months later, Elise was gone. Her shadow lifted like a storm passing over the horizon. Noah ran through the yard, his toy truck in hand, Hannah chasing him with a kite, its bright colors dancing against the Ohio sky. Daniel took her hand one evening, his voice steady despite the tremor in it. "Mom, I was blind before," he said, standing in the living room, the lamplight casting soft shadows. "But Hannah's been our light." I nodded, tears falling silently, and hugged them both, feeling the warmth of their embrace like a promise kept. That night I sat by the window, the moon casting silver light over the quiet street, its glow touching the kite tangled in the yard. It was a reminder that love could mend what betrayal broke. That family wasn't just blood. It was the courage to choose each other, to stand against the dark. I had learned that betrayal could shatter, but love rebuilt, steady and true. I hoped my story had touched others, urging them to hold their loved ones close and trust their instincts when shadows loomed. I wanted to hear their stories, what they would have done in my place, because their voices mattered and I was listening.